In El Salvador, over 5.4 million people took to the polls today. The Bolivarian Alliance for the Peoples of Our America People's Trade Treaty held its 21st Political Council meeting this Monday in a video conference format. And the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has described the sum of $1.7 billion pledged by donors this Monday at an international conference to help war-ravaged Yemen as disappointing. Hello and welcome to teleSUR English. I am Estefania Bravo from the headquarters of Quito in Ecuador. This is from the south. The Supreme Electoral Court of El Salvador offered preliminary results of the parliamentary and municipal elections held on Sunday. In a press conference, the presiding judge of the court, Dora Esmeralda Martinez, pointed out that the result reflects the will of the citizens and also congratulated the population and the representatives of all political parties for their civic behavior witnessed during voting day. Regarding the legislative election, the court indicated that 7,300 vote tally sheets have been processed, which is equivalent to 86.38%. Meanwhile, as regards the municipal elections, a total of 7,257 tally sheets have been conducted, which is equivalent to 85.87%. In both cases, the New Ideas Party and its coalition partner, the Grand Alliance for National Unity, maintains a wide lead.
It is important to highlight the remarkable voter turnout of 51%, despite the pandemic-related difficulties and risks. This was a challenge for the Supreme Electoral Court to get the population to turn out to vote, and we at the court are pleased because we provided the population with the necessary biosecurity measures, and this was verified by each one of the members of the court, who also went to cast their votes. And we were able to witness how the security measures had been complied with.
The electoral officials subsequently assured that efforts will continue to strengthen the Supreme Electoral Court.
I want to emphasize that the institution will continue to work on the path of transparency, to strengthen credibility and confidence, and to that end we suggest improving and developing the model of scrutiny and transmission used yesterday, to enhance it in future elections.
The President of the Supreme Electoral Court also acknowledged the work carried out by international observers during Sunday's vote.
In addition, the observers from the Organization of American States, as well as the other international observers who have also offered their recommendations. All of this has helped to strengthen the electoral processes and to make the electoral procedures more transparent, to ensure that the population is satisfied with what has been done in the electoral court.
The Colombian government announced that it will extend the closure of its land and river borders until June 1st in an effort to stop the spread of COVID-19 and contain the pandemic.
The national government decided to extend the closure of land and river borders until June the 1st. This measure is given within the framework of the pandemic, with the sole purpose of achieving the process of prevention, containment, and control of the pandemic for the benefit of Colombians and foreigners.
And on the border between Germany and France, cross-border workers will have 2% a valid PCR test every 48 hours, a compulsory measure imposed by Berlin from midnight on Monday evening. Germany on Sunday declared France's COVID-19 battered Moselle region a high-risk area for virus variants, prompting tougher entry rules for visitors at the border. France's eastern Moselle region is now classed as an area at particularly high risk of infection due to widespread occurrence of SARS-CoV-2 virus variants. Germany's Robert Koch Institute for Disease Control announced that from Tuesday, travelers from Moselle, which lies next to Germany's Saarland and Rhineland-Palatinate states, will need to be able to show a negative coronavirus test from within the previous 48 hours. Nigerian Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala made history this Monday as she became the first woman and the first African to lead the World Trade Organization. The development economist officially took up the role of the WTO chief this Monday after she was appointed by the WTO members on February 15th. Okonjo-Iweala, a long, high-powered career serving as Minister of Finance and Foreign Affairs in her native Nigeria and worked at the World Bank for 25 years. She hopes abounds that the 66-year-old will be able to help the WTO address the range of challenges, including navigating through the global economic crisis triggered by the COVID-19 pandemic. She has voiced particular concern about growing protectionism and nationalism during the coronavirus crisis and insists that trade barriers must be lowered to help the world recover. Israeli Foreign Minister Gabi Ashkenazi received the first ever ambassador from the United Arab Emirates to visit the country following last year's agreement to normalize ties. UAE envoy Mohammed Al-Khaja, who arrived early on Monday, delivered his credentials to Israeli President Reuven Rivlin at a ceremony in the occupied city of Jerusalem. The United Arab Emirates was the first country to agree to establish full diplomatic relations with Israel under the Abraham Accords, a pact brokered by former U.S. President Donald Trump. The agreement made the UAE the third majority Arab country to establish official ties with Israel following Egypt in 1979 and Jordan in 1994. The Bolivarian Alliance for the Peoples of Our America People's Trade Treaty held its 21st Political Council meeting this Monday in a video conference format. The session was opened by Venezuelan Foreign Minister Jorge Arreaza together with the organization's Executive Secretary Sacha Laurenti. ALBA member country foreign ministers focused their analysis on the economic and political conditions in each state and the region as a whole, as well as the prospects for cooperation over the next year. In his speech, the Venezuelan Foreign Minister highlighted the different challenges faced by the alliance in the face of the pandemic. Arreaza highlighted the efforts of ALBA member states in the creation of the ALBA Vaccine Bank and stressed the need to strengthen this initiative in order to guarantee mass vaccination in all member states.
We have seen how the Bolivarian Alliance has been activated in different areas. In the health field, of course, the first step was the creation of the Vaccine Bank. From Venezuela, we are making efforts to transport vaccines to the Caribbean. Soon, a significant number of vaccines will arrive in Dominica from China, but also Cuba, with all the solidarity and the rigor that characterizes Cuban medical science, is present there with its medical brigades, attending to COVID-19 patients with the medical protocols in all the countries of our alliance, saving lives.
Moving on, former French President Nicolas Sarkozy was sentenced to 3 years for corruption and influence peddling. The Paris Correctional Court specified that 2 of these years of incarceration are exempt from serving and that the 3rd year of imprisonment can be served as house arrest or surveillance with an electronic bracelet. Sarkozy, who was the president of France from 2007 to 2012, is accused of offering a plum job in Monaco to a judge in exchange for inside information on an inquiry into his campaign finances. The former president told the court he had, quote, never committed the slightest act of corruption. After the sentence, Sarkozy becomes the first French president to be sentenced to a prison term. The United States authorized the distribution of 4 million Johnson & Johnson's COVID-19 vaccines for emergency use. This news was known on Saturday, boosting President Joe Biden's plan to battle the outbreak that has killed more than 500,000 Americans. The Johnson & Johnson's vaccine is the third to be green-lighted in the U.S. after Pfizer and Moderna were provisionally approved in December. So far, over 65 million people in America have received at least one shot of either the Pfizer or Moderna vaccines, but unlike those, the Johnson & Johnson's vaccine requires just 1 dose and is stored at fridge temperatures, offering logistical and practical advantages. All 3 vaccines have been shown to fully protect against hospitalizations and death. On Sunday, about 100 asylum seekers were rescued off Libya's west coast, according to a Coast Guard's statement. Among the survivors were 6 women, 2 children, and 2 people who were transported at a hospital due to their critical condition. According to the Coast Guard's report, about 20 people are still missing. The International Organization for Migration, the IOM, said that most of the asylum seekers are from Cameroon, Sudan, and Mali. On Saturday, German charity Sea-Watch said it had saved nearly 150 migrants off the Libyan coast in 2 operations. According to the IOM, 1,200 asylum seekers died while crossing the Mediterranean in 2020. On Monday, China urged the United States to abandon its double standards and take practical measures to promote and safeguard human rights in its own country.
The life of everyone in the world, regardless of race, color, gender, or nationality, should be respected and cherished, and their human rights should be upheld and guaranteed. I hope the United States will abandon double standard and face up to its serious human rights issues in the countries such as racism and violent law enforcement, to take practical measures to promote and safeguard human rights in the country.
Nigerian opposition leader and former Prime Minister Hama Amadu was jailed on Monday over his alleged role in post-election violence. According to prosecutors, Amadu faces charges including speech inclined to set people against one another. After widespread protests over the results of the presidential election that handed victory to ruling party candidate Mohamed Bazoum over the opposition's Mahamadi Usmani. The opposition has alleged massive electoral fraud, a poll that had been touted as the country's first peaceful transfer of power since independence. Interior Minister Al-Kash Al-Hada said Amadou was the person mainly responsible for post-election riots in which 2 people were killed and over 460 arrested, while shops were looted and infrastructure was destroyed. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has described the sum of $1.7 billion pledged by donors this Monday at an international conference to help war-ravaged Yemen on the verge of famine as disappointing and far short of what was hoped for.
Pledges announced total approximately $1.7 billion. That is less than we received for the humanitarian response plan in 2020. And $1 billion less than was pledged at the conference we held in 2019. Millions of Yemeni children, women and men desperately need aid to survive. Cutting aid is a death sentence. The best that can be said about today is that it represents a down payment. I thank those who did pledge generously, and I ask others to consider again what they can do to help stave off the worst famine the world has seen in decades.
Protesters in Yangon refused to disperse on Monday even after riot police repeatedly bomb-guarded them with tear gas, forcing them to temporarily flee. The crowd of several hundred quickly regrouped to continue showing their defiance towards the seizure of power by the military. Security forces on Sunday fired live rounds as well as rubber bullets and tear gas into crowds of people demonstrating in a number of cities, including Yangon, Mandalay, and Dawei. Local reports said at least 18 people were killed and 30 were wounded. And staying in Myanmar, and despite Sunday's violent police response, protesters returned to the streets in many parts of the country. In Mandalay, Buddhist monks marched in the country's second largest city. Also in Mandalay, local media said 2 people had been killed as a result of the police action. On Monday, Iran rejected an accusation made by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on an attack of an Israeli-owned cargo ship in the Gulf of Oman last week.
We strongly reject the accusation made by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of attacking an Israeli-owned cargo ship. We feel that all the actions the occupying regime of Quds has committed over the past month in the Iranian security realm are extremely suspicious. We are closely monitoring them, and if something happens, we will give a proportionate response. The Persian Gulf and Sea of Oman are our definite security territories. We will not allow them to provoke fear-mongering by such remarks. The Prime Minister of Israel suffers from an obsessive mental disorder towards Iran. They imagine that through such comments and projecting their problems outward, they can help them fix the deplorable and awful situation that they are grappling with inside the occupied lands. Israel has started other suspicious actions in our region too. We are closely monitoring them, and in the field of our national security, Israel knows very well that our response has always been fierce and accurate.
And Iran's foreign ministry spokesman also said that the country will not have bilateral talks with the U.S. until it fulfills its commitment in the nuclear deal.
We won't have any bilateral talks with the United States as long as the U.S. has not rectified its wrong path. No change will occur in Iran's policy. Until today, that about 2 months have passed since Mr. Joe Biden's administration took office. They have not even verbally told us that they would resume complying with their commitments in the nuclear deal. This is really a historic change for Mr. Biden's administration to push ahead his electoral campaign in a particular direction, but now we are encountering a different government than what they claimed. If the United States wants to have a place at the nuclear deal's table, it must first return to implementing the Resolution 2231 and also effectively remove the sanctions. This path does not require any negotiations or give and takes.
On Monday, the Philippines launched the COVID-19 vaccination campaign, starting with frontline health workers from 6 hospitals in its capital, Manila. Several senior cabinet members, military and police officers also got vaccinated at different hospitals on the same day to enhance the people's confidence in the vaccine. On Sunday, China donated 600,000 doses of the Sinovac vaccine. To date, the country registers nearly 580,000 COVID-19 cases and more than 12,000 deaths.
It's okay. I feel good. There's just a little bit of pain. Siyempre, there's a needle. But after that, it's all good.
And we've been saying that since Sinovac is the only vaccine available, we should already take advantage of it. And as I've said, based on the results of the trials, it's 100% preventive of severe disease, and that's what we want for our health workers.
Ivory Coast launched its vaccination campaign against COVID-19 just a few days after receiving a shipment of the AstraZeneca vaccines through the COVAX initiative. Members of UNICEF and the World Health Organization attended an event in the city of Abidjan as the first phase of the country's vaccination program got underway. The West African country is among the first to administrate the COVAX vaccines and will prioritize health workers, teachers, and members of the armed forces in the first phase. COVAX is a global public-private initiative the World Health Organization helped to create for equitable vaccine distribution. And Ghana began its vaccination drive as well on Monday. In a ceremony at the 37 military hospital in Accra, top authority figures received their vaccinations. President Nana Akufo-Addo was the first to be vaccinated with the aim of setting an example. Religious leaders attending the event also called on Ghanaians to disregard conspiracy theories and get vaccinated to stop the spread of the virus in the country.
It's important that I set the example that this vaccine is safe by being the first to have it, so that everybody in Ghana can feel comfortable about taking this vaccine. It is important that everybody, at the end of the day, is vaccinated, and that's our objective.
And Finland's Prime Minister Sanna Marin announced the activation of the emergency powers as the government prepares to introduce tougher measures to slow the spread of the coronavirus.
Today on March 1, the government, along with the President of the Republic, has declared a state of emergency in the country in accordance with Section 3, Paragraph 5 of the Emergency Powers Act. At this stage, there is not immediate need to introduce the restrictions on basic freedoms laid out in Part 2 of the Emergency Powers Act. The government, however, does not rule out in the introduction of these measures, as their use depends on the behavior of the epidemic in the near future.
And with that story, we've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, don't forget to follow us on our social media accounts. We are on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram as well. For teleSUR English, I am Estefania Bravo. See you next time.